The quiet power move. Mindfulness techniques to dominate career games without raising your voice. You're sitting in that meeting. Everyone's talking over you. You're invisible, or worse, you're being steamrolled. And you think the answer is to be louder, to push harder, to demand respect. You're wrong. The most powerful people in any room aren't the loudest. They're the ones who've learned to command authority without saying a word. They've mastered their mind. They've weaponized their calm. And that's what this audiobook is about. Not noise, not aggression. Silent, unstoppable power. The kind that transforms careers. The kind that changes everything. Welcome to the Quiet Power Move. Chapter 1. Stop proving and start knowing. You're sending that email. You've already rewritten it 4 times, and you're still not hitting send. Why? Because you're waiting. You're waiting for it to sound perfect. You're waiting for it to prove that you're smart enough. You're waiting for it to convince someone, your boss, your team, yourself, that you deserve to be in that room. That's the trap. You're stuck in a constant cycle of proving. And here's what most people miss. The proving never ends. No matter how much you prove, no matter how many wins you rack up, no matter how many accolades you collect, there will always be another moment where you doubt yourself. There will always be another person whose approval feels like the missing piece. That's not a flaw in your competence. That's a flaw in your strategy. Imposter syndrome isn't real. I know that sounds harsh, but stay with me. What's real is this. You've been taught that your value comes from the outside, from other people's opinions, from their validation, from their permission. And because you believe that, you're constantly scanning the room for signs that you're not enough. You're looking for proof that you don't belong. Here's the brutal truth. That proof will never satisfy you because you're not actually looking for evidence. You're looking for certainty. And certainty is something no external source can ever give you. You already know your worth. I'm not being inspirational. I'm being literal. You know exactly what you're capable of. You know the problems you've solved. You know the projects you've completed. You know the people you've helped. That's not in question. What's in question is whether you're willing to believe it without waiting for someone else to confirm it. Imposter syndrome is just this. You're seeking external validation to fill an internal void. You've decided that your value isn't real unless someone else authenticates it for you. So you perform, you over-prepare, you rehearse, you second-guess every word that comes out of your mouth. You're exhausted because you're running a constant validation operation inside your own head. The moment, and I mean the exact moment, you stop trying to prove your worth to others and start knowing it internally, something shifts. Imposter syndrome loses its grip, not because you become arrogant or delusional, but because you've made a decision. My value is not negotiable. It's not up for a vote. I know what I can do, and I'm moving forward whether you approve or not. That's the key. Stop performing. Start being. You already know your worth. The question is, are you going to act like it? Let me paint a picture. You have an idea. It's a good one. You know it's good, but you don't share it. Why? Because you're waiting for permission. You're waiting for your boss to ask for your input. You're waiting for someone more senior to give you the green light. You're waiting for the right moment, the right context, the right approval. And while you're waiting, someone else, someone with less experience, less insight, less refined thinking, says the same idea, and everyone celebrates them for it. You're not invisible because you lack talent. You're invisible because you're waiting for permission you'll never get. Your boss doesn't need to validate your intelligence before you're intelligent. Your colleagues don't need to approve of your ideas before they're valuable. Your title doesn't need to expand before your contributions matter. You have a choice. This is it. This is the pivotal moment in this chapter. You have a choice. Keep seeking the green light that may never come, or start moving without it. Most people choose to wait. They choose the comfort of not having to risk anything. They choose to stay invisible because visibility requires a decision. It requires you to put something out into the world that might be criticized, that might be rejected, that might reveal that you're not as certain as you pretended to be. Permission is a trap. It's a socially acceptable way to avoid responsibility. You can always say, well, I was waiting for approval, or I was waiting for the right time, or I was waiting for more information. Permission keeps you small. Permission keeps you dependent. Permission keeps you seeking validation from people who have no obligation to give it to you. The difference between invisible and influential is often just one decision, not one promotion, not one big break, one decision, the decision to move without permission. Think about the people you respect at work, the ones who have real influence, the ones people listen to. They're not waiting for approval before they contribute. They're not seeking permission before they lead. They've decided something crucial. I'm going to act from the belief that my input matters regardless of whether anyone invites it. And that's what happens when you make that decision. People respond, not because you became arrogant, but because you stopped advertising your own self-doubt. You stopped waiting for external validation. And that absence of need for approval, that's what creates real authority. You have a choice. That's not empowering language. That's not motivational nonsense. That's a fact. You literally have a choice about what you're going to do next. You can finish listening to this chapter and go back to waiting, go back to seeking permission, go back to proving yourself to people who may never be convinced, or you can decide differently. Most of what you do at work is performance. You're managing an image. You're curating a version of yourself that you think will be acceptable, that will be approved, that will be validated. You're not being yourself. You're being a filtered, edited, optimized version designed for external consumption. That's exhausting, and it doesn't work. The people with real influence aren't performing. They're just being. They're not trying to convince you they're competent. They're just competent, and that competence is obvious. They're not trying to prove they belong in the room. They just belong, and everyone can feel it. They're not seeking your approval. They're indifferent to whether you approve, and that indifference is what makes them magnetic. You already know your worth. The only thing left is to stop performing it and start embodying it. That means less rehearsal, less self-editing, less checking in on whether people are still liking you. More directness, more clarity, more saying what you actually think.
This doesn't mean being reckless or abrasive. It means being honest. It means speaking from a place of knowing, not hoping, that you have something valuable to contribute. Stop proving. Start knowing. You came into this chapter feeling like you needed to prove your worth to everyone around you. You're leaving with something more dangerous, the recognition that your worth isn't up for debate. It's not a question to be answered by external validation. It's a decision you've already made about yourself. And once you make that decision internal, external approval becomes irrelevant. The moment you stop proving and start knowing, everything changes. Your presence shifts, your communication becomes clearer, your influence expands. Not because you became something different, but because you stopped advertising that you weren't sure about yourself. You've now confronted the first trap, the illusion that you need permission before you matter. You've decided, or you're about to decide, to move anyway. Now we need to talk about what's actually costing you your power. Because while you're busy seeking external validation, something much more precious is being stolen from you. Chapter 2. The Silent Cost of Seeking Validation. You think validation is free. It's not. Every single time you seek approval from someone else, you're paying a price, and you probably don't even realize how much you're paying. Let me be clear about what's happening. When you seek validation, you're not just asking for feedback. You're not just looking for information. You're giving your power away. You're essentially saying to another person, my value depends on your opinion. Whether I matter, whether I'm competent, whether I'm on the right track, all of that hinges on what you think of me. That's the opposite of power. That's dependency, and it's exhausting. The person who's always seeking approval is always weaker than the person who's secure in themselves. Not because they're less competent, but because they've given control of their emotional state to someone else. They're outsourcing their sense of self-worth, and that's a position you can never win from. Here's what I want you to see. You're bleeding energy constantly, right now, today. Not theoretical energy, real, finite, irreplaceable energy. That's the cost. You're in a meeting, you say something, you immediately scan the room to see how people reacted. Did they like it? Did I sound smart? Was that too aggressive? Should I have said it differently? Your attention splits. Part of you is present, part of you is running a constant approval audit in your head. You're monitoring reactions instead of focusing on what actually matters. That's energy being stolen from you. You send an email. Before you hit send, you read it one more time, then again. Does this sound professional? Will they think I'm competent? Will this hurt my chances of getting that promotion? You're not writing to communicate. You're writing to convince someone of something they may never be convinced of. You're using your cognitive resources to manage their perception of you. That's energy being stolen from you. You're in a conversation with your boss. They ask for your perspective on something. You have a perspective, but instead of sharing it directly, you soften it, you hedge it, you add disclaimers, you make it less threatening. Because you're not actually trying to share information, you're trying to avoid disapproval. That's energy being stolen from you. All day, every day, validation seeking, approval monitoring, perception management. This is the hidden tax on your career. This is what's keeping you from doing the work that actually matters. Your attention is your most valuable resource. Your energy is your most valuable resource. These are finite. You only get so much per day. And right now, you're spending the majority of it on something that doesn't work. Because here's the truth, it never works. You could spend your entire career seeking approval, and there will always be one more person you need to convince. There will always be one more standard you haven't met. There will always be one more doubt creeping in. Stop trading power for approval. That's not a trade, that's a loss. Let me tell you what real currency is in career growth. It's not validation, it's not approval, it's not fitting in or being liked. Real currency is competence, its results, its undeniable impact. Your attention and energy are finite. That's not negotiable. You have a fixed amount per day. The question is, where are you spending it? If you're spending it on seeking validation, you're not spending it on becoming genuinely skilled at what you do. You're not spending it on building strategic relationships with people who matter. You're not spending it on creating visible impact that people can't ignore. You're not spending it on learning things that compound over time. You're spending it on worrying what people think. That's the silent cost. It's not dramatic. It's not one big moment where you lose everything. It's 1,000 small moments where you're not doing the work that would actually elevate you. You're managing perception instead of building competence. Here's the paradox that will change everything for you. Stop caring what people think, and suddenly people think you're remarkable. This sounds backwards, but it's neuroscience, it's behavioral truth. When you stop spending energy on approval seeking, you free up that energy for actual work. When you stop managing your image, people perceive you as more confident. When you stop hedging and softening your perspective, people take you seriously. The person who's not desperate for approval is automatically more credible than the person who is. Real currency is competence. Build that. Become undeniably good at something. Deliver results. Show up with clarity and conviction. Make an impact that people can measure and see. That's what creates influence. Not approval, not likability. Competence. And here's what's wild. The moment you shift your focus from seeking validation to building competence, you become more valuable. You become more interesting. You become someone people actually want to follow and work with. Not because you became more likable, but because you became more real. You stopped performing. You started delivering. Think about the people in your industry who have the most influence, the ones you actually respect, the ones people pay attention to. They're not spending energy on seeking approval. They're not monitoring whether people like them. They've decided that their focus is on being excellent at what they do. And that decision, that one redirect of energy, is what separates them. Your energy is being stolen right now. Every moment you spend wondering what someone thinks about you is a moment you're not spending on becoming better. Every email you rewrite obsessing over tone is time you could have spent learning something that would actually move your career forward. Every conversation where you soften your perspective is a moment where you're diminishing your own value.
Stop trading power for approval. The cost is real. It's measured in opportunities missed, in skills not developed, in relationships not built because you were too busy managing the perception of existing ones.
In impact not created because you were too focused on whether your last contribution was approved. You came into this chapter thinking validation was free, that it was just something you picked up along the way. You're leaving with the understanding that validation is the most expensive thing you can pursue. It costs you energy, it costs you focus, it costs you time, and it never delivers what you're actually seeking. The moment you stop seeking validation and start building competence, everything changes. Your energy redirects, your focus sharpens, your impact grows. Not because the world suddenly approves of you more, but because you're no longer splitting your attention between being and appearing. You've now seen the cost of seeking validation. You understand what it's costing you. Now we need to talk about how to actually break free from it. Because understanding isn't enough. You need a strategy. You need a way to stay present and focused when every instinct in your body is telling you to check for approval. Chapter 3. The Mindfulness of Indifference. Most people think mindfulness is about being peaceful, being soft, finding your inner zen. That's not what this is about, not even close. Mindfulness is about power. It's about control. It's about creating distance between what happens to you and how you respond. And that distance is where your entire career changes. Here's what's happening right now. Your boss criticizes your work in front of the team. Immediately, your nervous system activates, your heart rate rises, you feel embarrassed, angry, maybe defensive. Your brain is flooded with cortisol and adrenaline. You're in fight or flight mode. And in that state, you do one of three things. You shut down, you lash out, or you go into people-pleasing overdrive. That's not strength, that's reactivity. And reactivity is the opposite of power. You can't control what your boss thinks. You can't control office politics. You can't control what people say about you or how they perceive you. That's outside your domain. But here's what you can control: your reaction to these things. That's the only thing that actually matters. Most people don't understand this. They think power comes from controlling the external world, from getting people to like you, from managing perception, from making sure everything goes according to plan. But external control is an illusion. You can't sustain it. You can't rely on it. It falls apart the moment someone doesn't cooperate. Real power comes from controlling your internal response, from staying clear and composed when everything around you is chaotic, from observing what's happening without being emotionally hijacked by it. That's controlled detachment. This isn't cold. This isn't uncaring. It's strategic. You're teaching your nervous system to create space between stimulus and response. In that space lies every bit of power you'll ever have. Let me give you a real example. You're in a meeting. Someone directly contradicts something you just said. Your immediate reaction, your automatic reaction, is to feel wrong, to feel stupid, to jump in and defend yourself, to prove you're right. That's the stimulus. That's the automatic response. And in that automatic response, you've just lost the meeting. You've just revealed insecurity. You've just given power to the other person. But what if you could create space? What if you could pause? What if instead of reacting, you could observe? You're the observer. You're watching this moment unfold. Someone is disagreeing with you. That's information. That's a data point. That's not an attack on your identity. When you shift from "I'm being attacked" to "I'm observing someone disagreeing with me," everything changes. Your nervous system doesn't activate. Your body language stays calm. Your voice stays steady. And in that calmness, you have power. The gap between stimulus and response is where your power lives. That's not motivational language. That's neuroscience. Viktor Frankl understood this. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our choice to respond. That's not just philosophically true, it's neurologically true. Your brain has pathways. They're like highways of thought and reaction. The more you use them, the deeper they get. The automatic reactions you have right now are the result of years of conditioning. Someone disagrees with you and you immediately feel threatened. Someone criticizes you and you immediately feel shame. Someone ignores you and you immediately feel invisible. These reactions happen in milliseconds. You don't consciously decide them, they're automatic. But here's what mindfulness does. It gives you the ability to widen that gap. It gives you the ability to insert consciousness between stimulus and response. And in that gap, you can choose differently. Observe, don't absorb.
This is the core practice. When something happens, a criticism, a rejection, a moment of conflict, you have two options. You can absorb it, you can take it personally, you can make it mean something about you, or you can observe it. You can acknowledge it as information about the external world, not information about your identity. Someone doesn't like your idea. You absorb that, I'm not good at ideas. I should stop speaking up. I'm not creative. Or you observe that, someone didn't like my idea. That's their preference. It tells me something about them, not necessarily something about me. Same event, completely different internal experience. One makes you smaller, one keeps you powerful. This is the observer stance. It's the most powerful position you can occupy. You're not in the event, you're watching it unfold. You're present to it, you're aware of it, but you're not fused with it. You're not the protagonist in a drama where every interaction matters for your survival. You're an observer of the drama, and observers have power. Participants are desperate. Reaction is weakness. Observation is strength. Let me say that again, because this is the entire foundation of silent authority. Reaction is weakness. Observation is strength. When you react, you're controlled. When you observe, you're in control. It's that simple, and it's that profound. Think about the moments in your career where you had the least influence, where you felt most powerless. I guarantee you were reactive. You were defending, you were explaining, you were trying to convince someone of something. You were emotionally invested in the outcome.
Now think about the moments where you had the most impact, where people listened to you, where you felt most in control. I guarantee you weren't desperate. You were present. You were clear. You observed what was happening without needing it to go a specific way. This is the difference. This is what mindfulness creates, not peace, power. The mindfulness techniques that work, the ones that actually shift your career, are the ones that train your brain to widen that gap, to create space between stimulus and response, to let you shift from participant to observer. Here's the daily practice. When something triggers you, and something will trigger you today, pause. Not for hours, for one breath, just one. In that breath, ask yourself, am I reacting or observing? Am I fused with this or watching this? That's enough to shift you. That's enough to create space. And in that space, you'll respond differently. You'll have access to wisdom you didn't have when you were reactive. You're the observer, not the character in the drama, not the victim of circumstances, not the person desperately seeking approval. You're the conscious awareness watching all of it unfold. That's where silent authority is born. Not in being nice, not in being popular, not in managing everyone's perception. In your ability to stay composed when others are reactive. In your ability to observe when others are absorbed. In your ability to respond from clarity instead of react from fear. You came into this chapter thinking mindfulness was about being peaceful. You're leaving with the understanding that mindfulness is about being powerful. It's about creating the gap between what happens and how you respond. It's about shifting from reactivity to observation. The observer has power. The reactor is controlled. You're now learning to be the observer. Now we need to talk about what's actually making you feel like an imposter when you're not. Because even with controlled detachment and the observer stance, your mind will still try to convince you that you don't belong. We need to crush that lie with facts, with evidence, with ruthless honesty about what you've actually accomplished. Chapter 4. Crushing Imposter Syndrome with Ruthless Honesty. Imposter syndrome isn't a permanent condition. It's not something you have to live with. It's not hardwired into your brain. You need to understand this clearly. Imposter syndrome thrives in vagueness. You feel like a fraud because you haven't clearly defined what you're actually good at. You haven't documented what you've accomplished. You haven't internalized your own evidence. So your brain fills the void with doubt. It tells you that you don't belong, that you got lucky, that someone's going to figure out you're not as capable as you pretend to be. That story is only possible because you haven't faced yourself with ruthless honesty. The moment you do, the whole narrative collapses. It's not about feeling confident, it's about being competent. This is the distinction that changes everything. You don't need to feel confident. That's an emotion. That comes and goes. Some days you'll feel confident, some days you won't. That's irrelevant. What matters is, are you actually competent? Have you actually done the work? Can you point to real results? If the answer is yes, then imposter syndrome is a lie. It's a story your insecure brain is telling you, and stories can be dismantled with facts. Here's what I want you to do. This is not optional. This is the core work of this chapter. Write down everything you've actually accomplished in your career. Everything. Not the things you're proud of, everything. That project you led that came in on time and under budget, write it down. That problem you solved that saved the company money, write it down. That person you mentored who got promoted, write it down. That presentation you gave that changed someone's mind, write it down. That relationship you built that opened a door, write it down. Be specific. Use numbers, use dates, use names. Don't say, I did good work. Say, I increased conversion rates by 23%. Don't say, I managed a team. Say, I led 5 people to deliver a project that generated $2 million in revenue. Don't say, I was helpful. Say, I coached 12 professionals who each moved into senior positions within 3 years. Facts dissolve self-doubt. Vagueness feeds it. Imposter syndrome requires vagueness. It needs you to be unclear about what you've done and what you're capable of. The moment you bring clarity, the whole thing falls apart, because you can't feel like a fraud if you have evidence that you're not. This is not arrogance. This is not self-deception. This is accuracy. You're telling yourself the truth about what you've actually accomplished, instead of letting your insecurity tell you lies about what you haven't. Once you've written it all down, read it. Read it again. Internalize it. This is your evidence. This is your reality. This is what imposter syndrome is competing against. Not feelings, not hunches, facts. Now here's where most people get stopped. They do this exercise and then they immediately discount it. Oh, but that success was just luck. But I had help on that project. But that was a different situation. But I was just in the right place at the right time. Stop. You're comparing your insides to their outsides. And that's the game that imposter syndrome plays. Let me explain what's actually happening. You're comparing your internal experience, all your doubts, all your fears, all the moments of uncertainty, all your mistakes, all the times you didn't know what you were doing, to someone else's external image, their highlight reel, their polished version, their curated representation of themselves. Of course you feel like an imposter. Everyone feels like an imposter when they're comparing their unfiltered reality to filtered versions of others. You're sitting in your office second-guessing your abilities. You're thinking about the time you didn't know the answer in a meeting. You're remembering the project that didn't go perfectly. You're focused on your incompleteness, your uncertainty, your growth edges. Meanwhile, you're looking at your colleague's Instagram and seeing their promotion announcement. You're reading their LinkedIn and seeing their list of accomplishments. You're hearing about their success in the hallway. You're seeing their external presentation of themselves. You're not seeing their doubts. You're not hearing about their failures. You're not experiencing their internal struggle. And so you conclude, they're competent, I'm an imposter. They have it figured out, I don't. That's not comparison. That's delusion. You're comparing reality to a filtered image and deciding that the image is more real.
Here's the truth. Everyone who's ever done anything significant has felt like an imposter. The people at the top of your industry have doubts. They make mistakes. They have moments where they don't know what they're doing. The only difference between them and you is that they've documented their competence. They've internalized their evidence. They've stopped comparing their insides to other people's outsides. Your only real competition is your former self. That's it.
Not your colleague, not the person whose success you're envious of, not the people you think are ahead of you. Your former self. Are you more competent than you were a year ago? Have you grown? Have you learned? Have you delivered results? If the answer is yes, then you're winning. Everything else is noise. The person who was you 12 months ago is your only meaningful comparison, not because that's spiritually pure, but because that's the only comparison that's accurate. You know what that version of you was capable of. You know what they struggled with. You know their limitations because you've surpassed some of them. And you know their wins because you've built on them. Everyone else is a phantom, their external image, their filtered version, their highlight reel. That's not a real person to compare yourself to. That's a fiction. And you're losing to a fiction. Stop competing with phantoms. Facts dissolve self-doubt, so let's be ruthlessly honest. You have accomplished things, real things, measurable things. You have created value. You have solved problems. You have grown. You have learned. You have delivered results. Imposter syndrome requires vagueness. It dies the moment you bring clarity to the facts of your own competence. It can't survive evidence. It collapses when you document what you've actually done. Write it down, all of it, every accomplishment, every result, every person you've helped, every problem you've solved, every growth you've achieved. Make it real, make it specific, make it undeniable. Then read it. And the next time your brain tells you that you don't belong, you pull out that evidence. You remind yourself of what you've actually done, not what you feel, not what you fear, what you've actually done. Because here's the brutal reality. Imposter syndrome is a choice. It's a choice to believe vagueness over facts. It's a choice to compare your insides to other people's outsides. It's a choice to compete with a phantom instead of with your former self. You can make a different choice. You can choose to be ruthlessly honest about what you're actually capable of. You can choose to document your competence. You can choose to stop comparing your unfiltered reality to filtered versions of others. You can choose to measure yourself against the only person who matters, the version of you that existed yesterday. It's not about feeling confident, it's about being competent. And you are competent. You've proven it. Now you just need to remember it. You came into this chapter feeling like an imposter, like you didn't belong, like somehow you'd fooled everyone into thinking you're more capable than you are. You're leaving with the understanding that imposter syndrome is built on a foundation of vagueness and false comparisons, and the moment you shine facts on it, the whole structure collapses. You know what you're capable of now. You've documented it. You've faced yourself with ruthless honesty, and you know that you belong. Not because you feel confident, but because you've proven you're competent. Now we need to talk about how to sustain this. Because knowledge isn't enough. You need daily discipline. You need a foundation that you build every single day. You need to understand that silent power isn't built in moments of inspiration. It's built through consistent, unglamorous practice. Chapter 5. The Discipline of Presence. Someone's talking to you. You're nodding. You're making eye contact. You look engaged. But you're not there. Part of your brain is in that email you need to send. Part of it is thinking about what you're going to say next. Part of it is anxious about something that happened earlier. You're physically present, but mentally scattered. That person can feel it. They know you're not actually with them. And in that moment, you've lost their respect. You've lost their attention. You've lost the opportunity to influence them. This is what happens to most people most of the time. Their body is in one place, but their mind is everywhere else. They're at dinner but thinking about work. They're in a meeting but mentally planning their evening. They're scattered, fragmented, absent. Presence is rare. Presence is power. When you're fully present in a room, people feel it immediately. Not because you're performing attention, but because you're actually there. Your attention is undivided. Your focus is complete. You're not distracted by anxiety or planning or self-doubt. You're just present to what's happening right now. That level of presence is magnetic. It's rare enough that people notice it. Most people have never experienced what it's like to have someone's complete attention. So when you offer it, it's remarkable. It changes how people perceive you. It changes how they respond to you. It changes the entire dynamic of the interaction. But presence isn't something you have or don't have. It's a discipline. It's a skill you build. Most people are mentally everywhere except where their body is. You won't be. Not because you're naturally gifted at focus, but because you're willing to train yourself.
The discipline comes before the results. This is crucial to understand. You don't feel like meditating before you meditate. You don't feel present before you practice presence. You don't feel focused before you build focus. The feeling comes after the discipline. It follows the work, not the other way around. This is where most people get stopped. They wait until they feel like doing something before they do it. They wait until they feel focused before they meditate. They wait until they feel present before they practice presence. They're waiting for motivation to hit them. It won't, not reliably. Discipline creates motivation, not the other way around. Here's what's actually happening at the neurological level. Your brain is like a muscle. The more you use a particular pathway, the stronger it gets. The more you practice focusing your attention, the better your brain becomes at sustaining that focus. The more you practice being present, the more natural presence becomes. This isn't mystical. This is neuroscience. Regular mindfulness meditation physically restructures your brain's ability to sustain attention and emotional regulation. The prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for executive function and attention, actually gets stronger. The amygdala, the part that hijacks you with fear and reactivity, actually gets smaller.
This is measurable. This is real. Meditation is not about achieving some spiritual state. It's not about becoming peaceful or enlightened. It's about rewiring your brain to work better. It's strength training for your mind. 10 minutes a day. That's it. Not an hour of meditation where you become a Zen master. 10 minutes. Consistent. Daily. For 30 days. After 30 days, your brain will function differently. Your ability to focus will be noticeably stronger. Your emotional regulation will be noticeably better. Your presence will be noticeably more powerful. This is where meditation becomes career strategy, not because it makes you feel good, but because it makes you more effective. It makes you more focused. It makes you more composed. It makes you the person in the room who's actually present while everyone else is scattered. Think about what that means in a negotiation. You're completely focused. The other person is managing anxiety, thinking about what they're going to say next, distracted by their phone buzzing. You're present. You're observing. You're listening to what they're actually saying instead of planning your response. Who has the advantage? Think about what that means in a difficult conversation. Someone's criticizing you. You're not reactive. You're not defensive. You're present to what they're saying. You're observing their concerns without being emotionally hijacked by them. You can respond thoughtfully instead of react emotionally. Who has the power? Think about what that means in a presentation. You're completely present. You're not anxious about how people are receiving you. You're not self-conscious about how you look or sound. You're just there, delivering value, present to your audience. Everyone else in the room is scattered, checking their phones, mentally somewhere else. You're the only one actually present. Who commands attention? Your attention is your authority. When you can direct your attention completely, you have an advantage that most people don't have. You can think more clearly. You can respond more effectively. You can understand people better. You can create better relationships. You can execute at a higher level. Most people give their attention away constantly. They're distracted. They're reactive. They're scattered. They're using their cognitive resources on anxiety and rumination instead on the actual work in front of them. They're weak because they're divided. You're going to be different. You're going to build the discipline of presence. You're going to train your brain to focus, and in doing that, you're going to become significantly more effective. Here's the actual practice. Find 10 minutes. Doesn't matter when. Morning works best because you're less distracted, but any time is better than no time. Sit somewhere quiet, close your eyes, follow your breath. That's it. Just breath awareness. Your mind will wander. That's not a failure. That's the whole point. The moment you notice your mind has wandered, gently bring it back to your breath. That's the repetition that strengthens your attention. Not the sitting in silence, the returning your attention again and again. Do this for 10 minutes, every single day. Not when you feel like it, every single day. After a week,
you'll notice you're slightly more focused at work. After 2 weeks, you'll notice people responding to you differently. After 30 days, you'll notice a significant shift in your presence, your focus, your composure. This is not optional if you want to build silent authority. This is the foundation. This is where the discipline actually lives. Not in the big moments, in the 10 minutes a day where you train your brain to focus. You'll notice people responding to you differently because you're different. You're present when they're used to people being absent. You're focused when they're used to people being scattered. You're calm when they're used to people being anxious. That shift makes you magnetic. The discipline comes before the results. You won't feel like meditating. You'll do it anyway. You won't feel present at first. You'll practice it anyway. But after 30 days of consistent practice, you'll be someone different. You'll be someone with authority. You'll be someone people listen to. You'll be someone who gets things done because your attention is actually on them. Presence is rare. Presence is power, and you're building it, one 10-minute session at a time. You came into this chapter understanding that presence matters, but not knowing how to build it. You're leaving with a clear, actionable practice, 10 minutes a day. That's your foundation. That's where silent authority is built. Not in grand gestures, in consistent daily discipline. You're building your brain. You're training your attention. You're becoming the person in every room who's actually there, and in that presence lies your power. Now we need to talk about how to wield that presence, because being present isn't enough if you're using all that presence to fill silence with words. We need to talk about the art of strategic silence, about how the people with the most power are often the ones who speak the least. Chapter 6. The Art of Strategic Silence. There's a silence in the meeting. Someone just asked a question, and there's a pause. Usually someone jumps in immediately. They feel uncomfortable with the silence. They fill it with words, with thoughts, with ideas, with anything to keep the void from existing. But not you. Not anymore. You're sitting in that silence. You're comfortable in it. You're not anxious. You're not performing. You're just silent. Thinking, observing, and then something happens. The other person gets nervous. They start talking. They start explaining themselves. They start revealing more than they intended to reveal, and you've just gained power without saying a single word. Silence is not weakness. This is one of the most misunderstood principles in business and in life. Most people read silence as agreement or confusion or weakness. They think if you're not talking, you're not contributing, that you're not intelligent or engaged or present. That's the opposite of reality. Strategic silence is one of the most powerful tools in the room. The person who can sit comfortably in silence while others scramble to fill it has power. Not because they're being cold or uncaring, but because they're secure in themselves. They don't need external validation through words. They don't need to prove they're thinking. They don't need to demonstrate they're present. They're just present, and that presence speaks louder than any words could. Think about the people you respect most, the ones with real authority, the ones people listen to. How much do they talk? I'd guess they talk less than the people around them. Not because they have nothing to say, but because they only speak when they have something valuable to contribute. The people who talk the most aren't usually the most respected. They're the most anxious. They're the most desperate to be heard. They're the most insecure. They need the external validation of their words in the air to feel like they exist.
You're going to be different. You're going to sit comfortably in silence. You're going to let other people fill the void. And in that silence, you're going to gain information. You're going to observe reactions. You're going to see who's confident and who's performing. Strategic silence is a weapon. I'm not being hyperbolic. It's a tool you can deploy with intention, and when you deploy it, you gain advantage. Here's a practical example. You're in a negotiation. You've made your offer. The other person is considering it. There's silence. Their instinct is to fill it. They're going to say something. They're going to make a counteroffer. They're going to reveal their minimum acceptable price. They're going to justify why they need better terms. You say nothing. You sit in silence. You let the discomfort work for you. And in that silence, they give you information. They reveal their position. They show you their limits. If you'd filled that silence with words, you would have revealed nothing. You would have robbed yourself of that advantage. But because you stayed silent, you won the negotiation before it really started. This is happening in every conversation at every level. The person comfortable with silence has power. The person uncomfortable with silence is controlled by their discomfort. When you don't need to fill every gap with words, you're projecting something powerful. You're saying, without saying it, I'm comfortable with my own thoughts. I don't need external validation through noise. I'm secure enough to just be, to just sit, to just exist without proving it. That's authority. That's power. Now, here's where most people misunderstand silence. They think silence means never speaking, that it means being quiet or withdrawn. That's not it at all. Strategic silence is a choice about when to speak and when not to speak. Before you speak, ask yourself one question. Am I adding value or seeking approval? That's the entire distinction. That's where your power lives. If you're speaking to add value, to contribute information, to clarify something, to move the conversation forward, speak. If you're speaking to get approval, to be heard, to prove you're smart, to make sure people know you were in the room, stay silent. Contributing data looks like this. You have information that will help the decision. You share it clearly, concisely. Then you stop talking. You don't elaborate. You don't add caveats. You don't soften it or undermine it. You deliver the information and you're done. Performing insecurity looks like this. You say something and immediately you're explaining it. You're adding qualifiers. You're making sure people understand you're not claiming to be an expert. You're undermining your own point before anyone else can. You're speaking from a place of needing approval. The people who speak less and deliver more are the ones people listen to. Your words become currency when they're scarce. This is basic economics. The more something is available, the less valuable it is. The more you talk, the less valuable your words become. People stop listening. They tune you out. They assume if you're always talking, you probably don't have anything important to say. But the person who speaks rarely, when they do speak, people listen because scarcity creates value, because they've established that they only speak when it matters. Think about your workplace. Who gets listened to most? Not the person in the meeting who makes 3 comments per topic, the person who makes 1 comment, one powerful, well-thought-out comment. That's the person people pay attention to. That's someone who understands strategic silence. That's someone who only speaks when they have something to say. And because their words are rare, their words are powerful. Here's the practice. In your next meeting, commit to speaking less. Not 0, less. Sit in silence. Observe. Listen. When you think of something to say, pause. Ask yourself, am I adding value or seeking approval? If it's approval, don't say it. If it's value, say it clearly and concisely and stop talking. Do this in one meeting. Notice what happens. Notice that the silence doesn't feel awkward for you. You're comfortable in it. Notice that other people fill it. They talk more. They reveal more. They show their hand, and you gain information. This is power. This is silent authority. Not from what you say, from what you don't say. Silence is not weakness. It's not agreement. It's not confusion. It's composure. It's confidence. It's strategic. When you can sit comfortably in silence while everyone around you is anxious and talking, you've claimed power. Let others fill the void. Let them do the work of breaking the silence. Let them reveal themselves through their words. You observe. You listen. You gather information. And when you finally speak, it matters. The person who talks less leads more. The person who speaks less influences more. The person comfortable with silence has more authority than the person desperate to fill it. You came into this chapter thinking you needed to be heard to have influence, that talking more would make you more visible. You're leaving with the understanding that the opposite is true. The less you talk, the more people listen. The more strategic your silence, the more power you have. Strategic silence is a weapon. You've now learned how to use it, not coldly, not manipulatively, but strategically, to gather information, to let others reveal themselves, to demonstrate your own composure and confidence. Now we need to talk about what you hear in all that silence, because silence isn't empty, it's full of information if you're listening for it. And listening requires something that most people have lost: intuition, the ability to sense what's really happening beneath what people are saying. Chapter 7. The Intuition Advantage. You're in a meeting. Someone presents an idea. Everyone's nodding. Everyone's excited. But something feels off to you. You can't quite articulate it. There's no logical reason to doubt it. All the data points towards it being a good idea. But your gut is telling you something different. Your intuition is screaming, no. What do? Most people ignore that signal. They override their intuition because they can't logically defend it. They don't have a spreadsheet that proves their gut feeling. So they go with the consensus. They go with the data. They ignore what their body is telling them. And 6 months later, they realize their intuition was right all along. This is the biggest mistake you can make. Your intuition isn't fuzzy or mystical or unreliable. It's data. Real data. It's your brain processing thousands of microsignals faster than your conscious mind can articulate them. Your intuition is data. Let me repeat that because this is fundamental. Your intuition is data. It's information, it's intelligence, and it's more accurate than you think.
Here's how it works at the neurological level. Your brain is constantly processing information at a subconscious level. It's picking up micro-expressions, it's registering tone of voice, it's detecting inconsistencies between what someone's saying and what their body language is communicating. It's sensing patterns, it's computing thousands of variables faster than your conscious mind can follow. And then your brain synthesizes all of that data into a feeling, a hunch, a gut instinct. That's your intuition. That's your brain telling you something based on information it's processed. The problem isn't that intuition is unreliable. The problem is that intuition gets atrophied. It gets weak. And it gets weak when you're anxious, distracted, or seeking external validation. When you're in a state of constant seeking approval, your brain isn't in a state to process subtle signals accurately. You're too busy monitoring what people think of you to notice what they're actually communicating. But when you've done the work from the previous chapters, when you've stopped seeking validation, when you've built the discipline of presence, when you've learned to observe without being emotionally hijacked, your intuition becomes crystal clear. It becomes a legitimate intelligence source. Mindfulness quiets the noise and amplifies your intuitive signal. That's exactly what's happening when you meditate. You're quieting the constant chatter of your anxious mind. You're settling your nervous system. And in that quiet, you can hear what your intuition is actually telling you. This is where silent authority is born, not in ignoring data, but in trusting data your conscious mind hasn't fully articulated yet. Think about the decisions you've regretted most in your career. How many of them involved you overriding your intuition? How many of them involved you going against your gut because you didn't have a logical justification for it? How many of them involved you saying yes when your body was saying no? Most of them. I'd guess most of them. Now, think about the decisions you're most proud of, the ones that worked out, the ones that changed your trajectory. How many of those involved trusting your intuition? How many of those involved you saying no when everyone was saying yes? How many of those involved you making a call that you couldn't fully justify but that felt right? The pattern is clear. Your intuition is more reliable than the committee. Your gut is a better decision maker than consensus. Your inner knowing is more accurate than the data everyone's looking at. Here's why. The committee is looking at the same data. They're thinking the same thoughts. They're influenced by the same biases. When everyone agrees, it's often because you're all making the same mistake. When you're the only one sensing something different, it's because you're picking up on something they're missing. This is your competitive advantage, your intuition, your ability to see or sense something that others miss. But you have to trust it, and trusting it means being willing to move without permission. Trust your gut, not the committee. This is the fundamental shift. You stop waiting for consensus. You stop needing everyone to agree before you move. You trust your intuition and you execute. And in that execution, you demonstrate authority. The most powerful people in business aren't waiting for perfect information. They don't have all the data. They don't have complete certainty. What they have is a decision-making process that combines data with intuition. They look at what they know, they listen to what their gut is telling them, and then they move. You don't need a committee to validate your instincts. You don't need consensus. You don't need everyone to understand your reasoning before you take action. Your intuition is your competitive advantage. Trust it. Making decisions without permission is what separates the influential from the invisible. The people who wait for validation from others never move fast enough to matter. They're always one step behind because they're waiting for someone to give them permission to act. But the person who trusts their intuition and moves immediately, they're ahead. They've already executed while everyone else is still debating. Decisions are made in silence. Think about that for a moment. The decision isn't made in the meeting where everyone's discussing. It's made in the quiet moment before the meeting. It's made when you're by yourself and you're asking your gut, is this right or is this wrong? That's where the real decision gets made, in silence, in your own mind, in your intuition. Everything that happens after that is just execution. It's just you following through on the decision you've already made. This is what silent authority looks like. You make your decision, you don't need to explain it, you don't need to convince people, you just move, you execute, and people follow because you're moving with conviction. Here's the practice. For the next week, pay attention to your intuitive signals. When something feels off, notice it. Don't override it immediately. Don't try to logic it away. Just observe it. Say to yourself, my gut is telling me something. What is it? What signal am I picking up? Then, in situations where it's low risk, trust that signal. If your intuition says, don't take this meeting, cancel it. If your intuition says this person isn't trustworthy, be careful. If your intuition says this deal isn't right, walk away. Notice what happens. You'll start to see that your intuition is accurate. You'll start to trust it more. And as you trust it more, you'll make faster decisions. You'll take bolder action, and people will respond to that. They'll respect the fact that you're not waiting for permission, that you're not seeking approval, that you're moving with conviction based on something deeper than data. You don't need permission to be right. Your intuition doesn't need consensus to be valid. Your gut doesn't need a committee to validate it. You're making decisions based on information your brain has processed. That's legitimate. That's powerful. That's how real authority operates. The moment you stop seeking validation for your intuitive decisions and start trusting them, you become dangerous. Not in a threatening way, but in terms of your effectiveness, in terms of your impact, in terms of your influence. You came into this chapter thinking intuition was something fuzzy and unreliable, that you needed data and consensus before you could make a decision. You're leaving with the understanding that intuition is real intelligence. It's your brain processing information your conscious mind hasn't fully articulated, and it's more accurate than the committee. Your intuition is data. Your gut is a decision-making tool. Your inner knowing is legitimate. And the moment you start trusting it without permission, you step into real authority.
Now we need to talk about how to project that authority externally. Because having intuition and making good decisions is one thing, but communicating that authority to the people around you is another. We need to talk about the paradox of power. The moment you try to appear powerful, you reveal weakness. Real power doesn't announce itself. Chapter 8. Projecting Authority Without Aggression. There's a person in your office who's trying really hard to seem powerful. They're commanding, they're loud, they're trying to impress people, they're performing authority. And everyone can feel it. Everyone knows they're trying. And in that trying, they've revealed their weakness. They need people to think they're powerful, which means they're not. Real power doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need to. It's felt. It's communicated through something much subtler than words or volume or aggressive posturing. It's communicated through posture, through eye contact, through the pacing of your speech, and most importantly, through indifference to whether people like you. The moment you try to appear powerful, you reveal weakness. You're essentially saying, I don't naturally have authority, so I need to fake it. I don't feel powerful, so I need to perform it. I'm not secure in myself, so I need to convince you of my competence. That's the opposite of power. Power doesn't perform. This is the fundamental distinction. Power doesn't need an audience. Power doesn't need applause. Power doesn't need validation. Real power just moves. It takes action, it achieves results, and people respond to that. The people with the most genuine authority are often the quietest. They're not trying to impress anyone. They're not commanding attention. They're just present. They're clear. They're moving with purpose. And because they're not desperate for your approval, they have it. Because they're not trying to seem powerful, they are powerful. Authority is quiet. Let me say that again, because this changes everything about how you show up in the world. Authority is quiet. It doesn't shout, it doesn't demand, it doesn't perform, it just is. Think about the people you respect most, the ones who genuinely have authority. How do they show up? Not aggressively, not loudly, usually calmly, usually with certainty, usually without needing to convince you of anything. They just move and people follow. That's quiet authority. That's what you're building. Now here's where most people get confused. They think quiet authority means being passive, being soft, being nice. It doesn't. Quiet authority can be direct. It can be firm. It can be confrontational when necessary. But it's never desperate. It's never trying to impress. It's never performing. You don't need permission to lead. This is crucial. You don't need a title. You don't need a promotion. You don't need someone to officially give you authority before you start acting authoritatively. Authority isn't granted. It's claimed. And the moment you claim it, through your presence, through your decisions, through your quiet conviction, people respond. The person who waits for permission to lead never leads. They're always waiting for someone to officially designate them as the leader, someone to give them the authority, someone to validate that they're allowed to be in charge. But the person who leads without permission, the person who starts making decisions with confidence, who starts taking responsibility, who starts moving with conviction, that person becomes the leader. Because leadership isn't a title, it's a way of being. Authority is quiet, and quiet authority doesn't ask for permission. Now let's talk about the biological shift that makes this possible, because this isn't just psychological, this is physical. Mindfulness isn't separate from your physical presence. They're connected. They're the same thing operating at different levels. When you're fully present, when you've done the meditation work from Chapter 5, something happens at the neurological level. Your nervous system settles. Your amygdala, the part of your brain that triggers fight, flight, or freeze, quiets down. Your prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for clear thinking, activates. And that shift shows up in your body. Your posture changes. You're not trying to make yourself small or trying to dominate space. You're just sitting or standing naturally. Your voice drops, not in volume necessarily, in pitch and in speed. You're not talking fast. You're not nervous. You're just speaking clearly. You move with intention instead of nervous energy. Watch someone who's anxious. They're fidgeting, they're moving too much, they're nervous energy in human form. Watch someone who's calm and present. They're still, they're grounded. They're moving when they move, speaking when they speak, pausing when they pause. Intention. People respond to that, not consciously, but at a biological level. People sense it. You're literally radiating a different frequency. Your nervous system is calm, so other people's nervous systems calm down around you. Your presence is grounded, so people feel grounded in your presence. You're not radiating anxiety, so people don't feel anxious. This is leverage that biological shift as a career weapon. It's not manipulation, it's alignment. You meditate, your nervous system settles, you show up differently, people respond differently. That's not manipulation, that's cause and effect. Here's what it looks like in real situations. You're in a meeting where people are getting heated. Everyone's reactive, everyone's emotional. The energy in the room is chaotic. You're the only one who's calm. You're the only one whose nervous system is settled. You're the only one present. And in that moment, all the power flows to you. Not because you said something brilliant, but because you're the only one not being hijacked by emotion. You're the only one thinking clearly. You're the only one actually present. That's how presence becomes authority. That's how quiet authority operates. You're not fighting for power. You're not performing. You're just the only one in the room who's truly grounded, truly present, truly clear. and you become the person everyone looks to, not because you're trying to be looked to, but because you're the only one not desperate for attention. This is the shift, from trying to seem powerful to actually being powerful, from performing authority to embodying it, from needing people to think you're in charge to actually being in charge.
Presence precedes position. Your presence, the way you show up, the way you carry yourself, the way your nervous system communicates, precedes any formal title or position. You build your authority through presence before you get promoted. And then you get promoted because you've already been leading. The person with the strongest presence is the person people follow, not because of their title, because of who they are. You came into this chapter thinking you needed to act powerful, that you needed to perform authority, that you needed to be loud or aggressive or commanding to have influence. You're leading with the understanding that real power is quiet. Real authority doesn't perform. Real influence comes from presence, from groundedness, from the biological reality that you're the calmest, clearest person in the room. Now we need to talk about how to sustain this, because building quiet authority in a moment is one thing. Building it consistently, day after day, is another. We need to talk about the non-negotiables, the daily practices that compound into unshakable presence. Chapter 9. Building the Unshakable Foundation. You want to know the biggest difference between the person who builds real authority and the person who stays invisible? It's not talent, it's not luck, it's not some innate gift, it's the daily non-negotiables. Silent power isn't built in big moments. It's not built when you give the perfect presentation or when you nail the interview or when you finally get recognized. It's built in the moments no one's watching. It's built in the 10 minutes you meditate at 6 in the morning. It's built in the documentation of your wins that only you will read. It's built in the consistent execution on commitments that nobody celebrates. The foundation is built daily. Most people are waiting for the moment. They're waiting for the big break. They're waiting for someone to discover them. They're waiting for the perfect opportunity. And while they're waiting, the person who will eventually beat them is building. They're not waiting. They're just consistently doing the small things that compound into unshakable authority. These small disciplines compound. That's the key. One meditation session doesn't change anything. One documented win doesn't shift your perception of yourself. One meaningful conversation doesn't build a relationship. But one meditation session every single day for 30 days, that changes your brain. One documented win a week for 12 weeks, that changes your self-perception. One meaningful conversation a month for a year, that builds a network that opens doors. After 30 days of consistent discipline, you'll be different. You'll be slightly more present, slightly more focused, slightly more composed. Not dramatically different, just slightly, but you'll feel it. People around you will feel it. After 90 days, you'll be unrecognizable. The person you were 3 months ago will seem like a different person. You'll have discipline, you'll have presence, you'll have documented evidence of your competence, you'll have relationships with people ahead of you, you'll have moved, you'll have executed, you'll have built. The person who beat you didn't get lucky, they didn't have advantages you don't have. They just started the daily work 3 months ago and you're still thinking about starting. That's the only difference. That's it. Small disciplines, massive results. This is how change actually happens, not through big dramatic action, through small, consistent practice. The 10 minutes a day meditation is a discipline. The email documenting your weekly wins is a discipline. The one strategic phone call to someone ahead of you is a discipline. The saying no to distractions to focus on what actually matters is a discipline. These are small. None of them are impressive to talk about. None of them would make for a good story at a party. But compound them over time and they become your unfair advantage. They become the difference between you and everyone else. Here's the actual daily practice, non-negotiable, every single day. This is your foundation. First, 10 minutes of meditation. We covered this. You know why this matters. Your brain is being rewired. Your nervous system is being trained.
Do it every single day, not when you feel like it, every single day. Second, document your wins. Every day, write down one thing you accomplished, one thing you executed on, one problem you solved, one person you helped, one commitment you kept. Be specific, use numbers, make it real. This isn't arrogance, this is evidence. You're building a file of proof that you're competent. When imposter syndrome creeps in, you read this file. When you need to update your resume or talk about your impact, you reference this file. This takes 5 minutes. Write it down, date it, move on. By the end of 30 days, you'll have 30 documented wins. By the end of a year, you'll have 300. That's irrefutable evidence that you're not an imposter. Third, one strategic conversation. Not networking, not brown-nosing. One genuine conversation with someone ahead of you. Once a week, that's it. 15 people a year you're building real relationships with. People who've already done what you want to do. People whose advice actually matters. People who can see your potential and offer guidance. This isn't about using people. It's about genuine relationship building from a place of curiosity and mutual respect. You reach out, you ask them about their journey. You ask them what they learned along the way. You ask them what they would do differently. And you listen. You actually listen. You don't pitch them, you don't ask for favors, you just learn from them. And something remarkable happens. Because you're genuinely interested, because you're not trying to use them, because you're approaching them with respect and curiosity, they start investing in you. They start offering guidance. They start opening doors to you. They start putting you on their radar. You don't need permission from your boss or your company to do this. You don't need approval. You're building your own board of directors, people who are ahead of you, people who can see where you're trying to go, people who can offer wisdom, people who can open doors that your company never would. This is how real career growth happens, not through your company's development program, through your own intentional relationship building with people that matter. Fourth, consistent execution on your commitments. When you say you're going to do something, you do it. When you commit to a project, you deliver. When you make a promise, you keep it. This sounds basic, but most people don't do this. They overcommit, they underdeliver, they make promises and then get distracted by something else. You're going to be different. You're going to commit to fewer things but execute on everything you commit to. That consistency builds authority. Not because you're doing remarkable things, but because you're reliable, because you do what you say you're going to do, because people learn that they can trust you.
That combination is unbeatable. Meditation plus documented wins plus strategic relationships plus consistent execution. That's your foundation. That's what nobody else is doing. That's your unfair advantage. You don't need permission to grow. Your boss doesn't need to approve of your meditation practice. Your company doesn't need to validate your relationship building. Your colleagues don't need to support your documented wins. You're building this for yourself, by yourself, without permission. Consistency is your unfair advantage. In a world where most people are inconsistent, where most people start strong and fade, where most people need motivation to keep going, you're consistent. You're showing up every single day. You're doing the small things whether you feel like it or not. You're building while everyone else is waiting. That consistency will separate you. Not dramatically at first. You won't notice a massive difference after 2 weeks, but after 2 months, after 3 months, after 6 months, the gap will be undeniable. You'll be in a different league. You'll have presence. You'll have relationships. You'll have evidence of your competence. You'll have moved. Here's the hard truth. The foundation is built when no one's watching. It's built in the moments that feel small and insignificant. It's built in the daily non-negotiables, the meditation nobody sees, the documentation nobody reads, the conversations nobody knows about, the execution on commitments that go unnoticed. But that foundation is what everything else is built on. That foundation is what makes you unshakable. That foundation is what makes you the person people eventually respect and follow and want to work with.
The person who builds the unshakable foundation is the person who eventually achieves extraordinary results. Not because they're lucky, but because they've spent months or years building something solid while everyone else is still dreaming about it. You came into this chapter thinking you needed big moments to build authority. You're leaving with the understanding that authority is built in small moments, daily moments, non-negotiable moments, moments that compound into something undeniable. The foundation is built daily. You know what it takes. You know what the daily non-negotiables are. Now we need to talk about the final shift, the moment where you stop being someone building authority and you become someone who embodies it, the moment where you recognize that you don't just have the tools, you are the tool. Chapter 10. You are the authority. Act like it. You came into this audiobook feeling invisible or powerless or uncertain. You thought the answer was somewhere outside of you. You thought you needed someone to give you permission. You thought you needed external validation. You thought you needed to figure it out before you could move. Everything in this audiobook points to one reality, one simple, undeniable reality. You've already got what you need. You don't need a meditation app to be calm. You have a mind that can be trained. You have the capacity to be present right now. Meditation doesn't create presence. It reveals it. It removes the noise so you can access what's already inside you. You don't need permission to be competent. You're already competent. You've already solved problems. You've already delivered results. You've already grown. You've already proven yourself. Competence isn't something you're waiting to develop. It's something you've already developed and you're just refusing to acknowledge it. You don't need your boss's approval to lead. Leadership isn't a title that gets handed down from above. It's a choice you make to take responsibility. It's a decision to move forward even when nobody's given you official permission. It's understanding that authority isn't granted by institutions. It's claimed by individuals. You need to stop waiting and start deciding. This is the core of this final chapter. This is the message that everything else has been building toward. You're not waiting for something external to change. You're not waiting for permission. You're not waiting for the right moment. You're not waiting for more information or more confidence or more validation. You're deciding right now, in this moment. Authority isn't granted, it's claimed. This is the distinction that changes everything about your relationship to power. Authority doesn't come from above. It doesn't come from a promotion or a title or someone else's approval. Authority comes from you, from a decision you make about yourself, from a commitment to moving forward regardless of whether anyone has given you permission. The moment you claim your authority, through discipline, through presence, through ruthless honesty about who you are and what you've done, people respond. Not because you suddenly became different, but because you stopped pretending to be less than you are. You stopped performing insecurity. You stopped seeking validation. And in that shift, people see you differently. They respect you differently. They listen to you differently. They follow you differently. You are the authority. Let me say this clearly because this is the entire point. You are the authority. Not someday, not when you get promoted, not when you feel more confident, not when you've done more meditation. You are the authority right now, in this moment, as you are. You have the intelligence, you have the experience, you have the capacity to think clearly and move decisively. The only thing standing between you and fully embodying that authority is your willingness to claim it. Most people will finish this audiobook and go back to exactly how things were. They'll go back to seeking validation, back to waiting for the green light that may never come, back to performing insecurity, back to doubting yourself even though you have evidence that you're competent. Keep invisible even though you have the capacity to be influential. This is a valid choice. Most people will choose this. It's familiar. It's safe. It requires nothing from you except to keep doing what you've always been doing. Choice 2 is you can decide differently. Starting today,
starting with your next meeting, starting with this moment. You can decide that you're done waiting. You're done seeking approval.
You're done performing insecurity. You're done comparing yourself to phantoms. You're done treating your intuition like a liability. You're done giving your power away. You've always had a choice. Let me be clear about this. Everything that's happened in your career up until this moment has been a choice. The invisible position you're in wasn't forced on you. You chose it. You chose to seek validation instead of building competence. You chose to wait for permission instead of moving. You chose to doubt yourself instead of acknowledging what you've accomplished. Those were choices. And because they were choices, you can choose differently. The question is, what are you going to choose? Because here's what happens when you choose authority. When you decide that you don't need permission, when you decide that your intuition matters, when you decide that you're going to move with conviction even when nobody's given you the green light, things change. Not magically, not overnight, but they change. Your presence shifts. People feel it. You're not desperate anymore. You're not performing. You're just there. And that presence creates space around you. Authority starts now. Your communication becomes clearer. You say what you actually think instead of filtering it through what you think people want to hear. You contribute ideas even when you haven't been asked for them. You speak up in meetings instead of staying silent. And because you're not hedging or softening or undermining yourself, people take you seriously. Your execution becomes sharper. You're not spending energy on seeking approval, so you're spending it on actually doing good work. You're not second-guessing yourself, so you're moving faster. You're not waiting for perfect information, so you're learning by doing. Your results improve. Your relationships deepen. The people ahead of you see that you're serious, that you're not just talking about wanting to grow, that you're actually building, that you're actually moving. And they start investing in you. They start opening doors. They start advocating for you. Your reputation shifts. You stop being the person who's asking for permission and you become the person who's making things happen. You stop being invisible and you become someone people respect. You stop being someone people tolerate and you become someone people want to follow. All of that comes from one decision, the decision to claim your authority. You don't need permission. This is the phrase you need to repeat to yourself every single day. You don't need permission to be smart. You don't need permission to have good ideas. You don't need permission to take responsibility. You don't need permission to lead. You don't need permission to move. You don't need permission to be who you actually are. Authority starts now. Not next week, not next month, not after you meditate for 90 days. Now, in this moment. You're claiming your authority. You're saying no to seeking validation. You're saying no to waiting for permission. You're saying no to doubting yourself when you have evidence that you're capable. Here's what happens in the next 24 hours. You're going to be in a situation where you'd normally seek approval. Someone's going to ask you something, or you're going to have an idea, or you're going to face a decision, and your automatic reaction will be to seek validation, to check in, to make sure it's okay. And in that moment, you're going to remember this audiobook. You're going to remember that you are the authority. You're going to remember that you don't need permission. You're going to remember that claiming your authority is a choice you can make right now. And you're going to choose differently. You're going to speak up instead of staying silent. You're going to move instead of waiting. You're going to trust yourself instead of seeking validation. That one choice, that one moment, that one decision to act from authority instead of from insecurity, that will change everything. Not because one moment changes careers, but because that one moment becomes the first of many. Because you realize that you can make that choice in every moment, that you can claim your authority in every situation. And the person who does that consistently is the person who builds an unshakable foundation, the person who becomes genuinely influential, the person who commands respect without trying, the person who leads without needing official permission. That person can be you, starting right now. You are the authority. You don't need permission. The choice is yours. Authority starts now. This is where we end.
Not because the work is done. The work is just beginning. This is where we end because you have everything you need. You have the understanding, you have the tools, you have the knowledge. What you don't have anymore is an excuse. You know about the imposter syndrome trap. You know about the cost of seeking validation. You know about the mindfulness of indifference. You know about the power of documented competence. You know about the discipline of presence. You know about the intuition advantage. You know about the paradox of power. You know about the foundation. And now you know that you are the authority. What happens next is up to you. You can go back to exactly how things were, or you can claim what's already inside you. You can choose authority. You can choose to move. You can choose to lead. You can choose to be influential. This is your moment. This is your choice. This is where your quiet power move begins. What are you going to choose? You came into this audiobook feeling invisible or overpowered. You're leaving with something different. You're leaving with the understanding that silent power is real power. Not noise, not aggression, discipline, presence, honesty about who you are and what you've done. The mindfulness techniques in this audiobook are audiobook weapons. They sharpen your intuition. They dissolve imposter syndrome. They project the kind of quiet authority that makes people listen without you asking them to. But here's the thing. Understanding is not transformation. Knowledge is not power. Only action is. So here's your challenge. Starting today, implement one thing from this audiobook, one discipline, one meditation session, one moment of strategic silence, one honest conversation about your accomplishments. Don't wait until you feel ready. Ready is a trap. Do it while you're still afraid. That's where growth lives. The quiet power move isn't about being soft. It's about being unstoppable. And that person, the one who's unstoppable, that's you. But only if you decide to be. Your move.